Imagine inheriting a house, a grand Victorian mansion that has stood the test of time, its walls echoing with the whispers of generations past. The very thought of such an inheritance fills you with a mix of excitement and curiosity. The house, with its intricate woodwork and towering spires, seems like a dream come true, but what if this dream harbored a dark secret, one that would turn your excitement into dread? And finding out it's hiding something sinister. The shadows in the corners seem to move on their own, and the creaking floorboards sound like whispers of the past. The air is thick with an unspoken history, and you can't shake the feeling that you're not alone. When Sarah inherited her grandmother's Victorian home, she was thrilled. The house was a beautiful relic of a bygone era, filled with antique furniture and memories of her childhood visits. She remembered running through the grand hallways, her laughter echoing off the high ceilings. Now, as an adult, she saw the house as a treasure trove of history and nostalgia. But the attic held a dark secret. A dollhouse, an exact replica of her new home. It was a miniature version of the mansion, down to the smallest detail. The tiny windows, the delicate furniture, and even the wallpaper matched perfectly. It was as if someone had painstakingly recreated the house in miniature form. But there was something unsettling about it, something that made Sarah's skin crawl. Her grandmother had always spun creepy tales about the dollhouse being alive, stories that Sarah had dismissed as mere bedtime tales. Her grandmother would sit by the fire, her eyes twinkling with mischief, and tell stories of the dollhouse's mysterious movements and the strange noises that came from the attic at night. Sarah had always thought they were just stories, meant to entertain and frighten her as a child. But Sarah brushed it off as folklore. She was a rational person, and she didn't believe in ghosts or haunted houses. She thought her grandmother's stories were just that, stories. But as she stood in the attic staring at the dollhouse, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the tales than she had realized. Yet she couldn't shake the chill it gave her. The air in the attic was colder than the rest of the house, and the shadows seemed to move just out of the corner of her eye. She felt a shiver run down her spine, and she wrapped her arms around herself, trying to ward off the cold. One rainy afternoon she decided to explore it. The rain tapped against the windows, creating a soothing rhythm that seemed to call her to the attic. She climbed the narrow stairs, each step creaking under her weight, and pushed open the door. The attic was filled with old furniture and dusty trunks, relics of a bygone era. Dust-covered furniture and old trunks made her feel like she'd stepped back in time. The air was thick with dust, and the smell of old wood and forgotten memories filled her nostrils. She ran her fingers over the surface of an old trunk, leaving a trail in the dust. It was like stepping into a time capsule, a glimpse into the past. The dollhouse stood there with windows and doors intricately designed, but something was off. The tiny windows seemed to watch her, and the doors were slightly ajar, as if inviting her to look inside. She knelt down and peered into the dollhouse, her breath fogging up the tiny windows. The rooms inside the dollhouse were different. They were not just miniature versions of the rooms in the mansion. They seemed to have a life of their own. The furniture was slightly out of place, and the tiny figures inside seemed to be frozen in mid-action, as if they had been caught in the middle of something. Furniture misarranged, and tiny, lifelike figures that were too detailed to be mere dolls. The unease grew. The figures were so detailed that they seemed almost alive, their tiny eyes glinting in the dim light. She reached out to touch one, but pulled her hand back at the last moment, a sense of dread washing over her. That night, whispers from the attic echoed through the house. They were faint at first, just a soft murmur that could have been the wind. But as the night wore on, the whispers grew louder, like a conversation she couldn't understand. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her heart pounding in her chest, growing louder like a conversation she couldn't understand. Determined, Sarah ventured up. She grabbed a flashlight and made her way to the attic, her footsteps echoing in the silent house. The whispers grew louder as she climbed the stairs, and she felt a sense of dread settle over her. The whispers stopped, but the figures inside were now in different positions. They were no longer frozen in mid-action, they had moved. The tiny figures were now gathered around the dollhouse's tiny fireplace as if they were having a meeting. She felt a chill run down her spine as she realized that the figures had moved on their own. The tiny bed had a new occupant, a doll that looked eerily like her grandmother. The doll's eyes seemed to follow her as she moved, and its tiny mouth was twisted into a sinister smile. She felt a wave of nausea wash over her as she realized that the doll was an exact replica of her grandmother. A chill ran down her spine. She backed away from the dollhouse, her heart pounding in her chest. She felt a sense of dread settle over her, and she knew that she had to get out of the attic. Suddenly, the dollhouse doors slammed shut. The sound echoed through the attic, and she jumped, her heart racing. She turned to leave, but the attic door was stuck. She pulled on the handle, but it wouldn't budge. Panic-stricken, Sarah found the attic door stuck. She pulled on the handle with all her strength, but it wouldn't move. She felt a sense of panic rise in her chest, and she pounded on the door, hoping that someone would hear her. The figures inside the dollhouse moved on their own. She turned back to the dollhouse and saw that the figures were now moving, their tiny limbs jerking in unnatural movements. She felt a wave of nausea wash over her as she realized that the figures were alive. Her grandmother's tiny figure now at the window, staring out. The doll's eyes seemed to follow her as she moved, and its tiny mouth was twisted into a sinister smile. She felt a wave of nausea wash over her as she realized that the doll was an exact replica of her grandmother. Heart racing, Sarah forced the door open and fled. She ran down the stairs, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't stop until she was outside, the cool night air filling her lungs. She looked back at the house, its dark windows staring back at her, and she knew that she would never go back to the attic. She never returned to the attic. The dollhouse remained, a silent sentinel in the dusty attic. She couldn't bring herself to go back, and she avoided the attic at all costs. The house seemed to hold its breath, waiting for her to return, but she never did. The dollhouse remains an unsettling reminder of that night. Was it a warning? She couldn't shake the feeling that the dollhouse was trying to tell her something, that it held a secret that she was meant to uncover. But she couldn't bring herself to go back and find out. Or had the dollhouse captured her grandmother's spirit, or something darker? She couldn't shake the feeling that the dollhouse was more than just a toy, that it held a dark power that she couldn't understand. She wondered if her grandmother's spirit was trapped inside, or if something more sinister was at play. To this day, it stands silent in the attic, a creepy memento of a past that won't let go. The house remains, a silent sentinel, its dark windows staring out at the world. The dollhouse sits in the attic, waiting for someone to uncover its secrets. But Sarah knows that she will never go back, that some secrets are better left buried.